Hi everyone, welcome to this video about the second lesson I'm going to talk about in the Introduction to Chemistry unit for Year 7. This one is about chemical symbols and it's an introduction to the periodic table. And really it builds on what was covered in the first lesson, which is the first of our two big ideas. And that big idea is well, it's maybe easier if we just have a look back at the diagram. It's this idea that actually all of the stuff that's out there in the universe can be reduced down to what are called elements. These are the fundamental units of matter, let's say. And what's important about the elements is that they are made up of the same type of atom. And this idea that different elements have different types of atoms, that is the big idea that we need to get across to students. And when we do GCSE and we start to look at electron structure and all of that stuff, protons, nucleus, whatever, it all comes back to that idea that each element has its own specific type of atom. So what I'm going to do here is start by just kind of recapping on that idea with students, and then I'm just going to get straight into it and say, well, actually, it turns out that I'm going to turn my camera around. It turns out that there are about 118 of these elements that have been discovered. So, hopefully you guys can see that. So I'm going to print out copies for students, and I'm going to make sure I've got a copy printed out for myself. And I'm just going to go through it under the visualizer. And I like to I like to think about 5 things that I want students to take away from my explanation of the periodic table. So the first thing is just to let them have a look at it. It's quite overwhelming when you first see it. They've probably kind of seen it before, maybe in primary school or, I don't know, in TV shows, whatever. They've probably got some idea this is like a cool sciencey thing. So just give them a little bit of time to have a look at it. And then we're going to start drawing their attentions to the main things they need to look out for. So the first 2 of my 5 things that I'm going to draw their attention to, we can start with hydrogen. I'm going to say in each box, the first thing you've got here is the name of the element. So I'll just put element name, and I would get them to draw with you on this. Although if your school has a policy where they just need to watch, then that's fine as well. But I tend to get them to draw just, especially later, that can be quite important. That's the element name, and then I draw their attention to this capital H above and say, in each box you've also got an element symbol. And we'll do more on that later in the lesson. So for now, I'm just going to draw their attention to it and say, in the box, you've got the element symbol. The next thing I'm going to draw their attention to is these numbers along the top. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 0. And I'm going to say that these are the group numbers. Now, it can be a little bit tricky to lay these out. So I'm going to put group number up here. It's just, as I'm sure you've experienced before, it can be a bit awkward then with the period number, but let's just do it like this for now. So I'm going to put group number. And I really want to make sure that they're clear that the groups are these columns. So I might even, just to emphasize this, say that's group 1, that's group 2, ... and so on. And later, I mean, you could even check it just on the spot and say, okay, calcium, what group number is that in? And just get them to do fingers up. So show them it's in group 2. Okay, what about carbon? What group is that in? Get them to show you on their fingers is group 4. Just so that they're really clear that the group number tells you about the column. Then what I'm going to do is label down here and say that these are the period numbers. And again, this is where it just gets a bit awkward, doesn't it? But I might do something like this, just to separate it from the group number. So I'm going to put a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then period number, I'm going to have to write, maybe I should have done these in a different colour, but maybe I'll put period number like this, period number. And again, just to emphasize, I might write period 1, period 2, ... something like that, just so they know that these are the periods. And it's just worth emphasizing to them, this one is a period. This is the top row. that's one that they often overlook, and there's some questions later on which test for that misconception, because they might often think that that is period 1 there, because that's the first kind of full, almost full looking row, but actually that is period 1, and that's just something to emphasize. So we've done 4 things there. We've done the element name, we've done the element symbol, we've talked about the groups being the columns, we've talked about the periods being the rows. I should have said for the periods, again, I would be saying, just to check that misconception, okay, what about sodium? What period would that be in? A lot of them might say 2, you want to make sure they're all saying 3, and you can just check that and sort that straight away before you do anything else. The last thing that I would talk about then is the, I guess what I would call the categories, where the different categories of elements lie. So this is metals, non-metals, and then I also do one for transition metals as well. So the first thing I'll do is, let's do the metals. If you've got different colours, or you can do this with highlighters, that's fine. I quite often just do it with a pen. So let's do the metals down here. And I'll just literally draw around this and get them to draw with me, just so they're really, really clear where these things are. So I'll say everything on the left-hand side is the metal. So I'm going to go over here like this. I want to leave a bit of extra room up here so that I can do an extra bit for the transition metals. So I might do it like that, just leave a little space. But then I can go up here like this. Oops, I've gone too far. And then I'm going to stop at aluminium. So I'm then going to go down like this and say, and show them this stepped line. And that's something that comes up in one of the hinge questions later. They've got to recognize that down here, what separates the metals and the non-metals is a stepped line. And again, I'm not too bothered about understanding here. They don't need to know why it's a stepped line or anything. This lesson is purely about getting them familiar with the periodic table so they can identify where different things are, because that deeper understanding is going to come later. So this is maybe not the most satisfying lesson, but it's important that they just get a feel for it. So what I'm going to do is draw that line around there in either a pen or I could do it in a highlighter, and I'll just write something like metals in that colour pen up at the top. So I don't think this needs to be too fancy. I'm then going to do the non-metals. So definitely don't do what I did and draw your blue line around boron as well. But then I'm going to show them everything over here is a metal, a non-metal. I haven't forgot hydrogen, so I need to make sure I emphasize that as well, because that's one that they often forget. They're not sure whether it's a metal or a non-metal or what. So I'm going to draw it down here like this. And then I've got the step line again. So just to save time on this video, I'm just going to do that without a ruler. Show them that these ones here are the non-metals, and then I'll label that up here like this. And really, the main thing at this stage is that they've just got a sense that metals are kind of over on the left and non-metals are over on the right. And we mustn't forget hydrogen either. Let's draw a box around that, just so they know hydrogen's a non-metal too. And then I think it's always worth doing the transition metals as well. So I tend to just do a kind of, box within a box almost. Do that in another different colour, so I've done it in green here. And just say, well, this box in the middle, we call those the transition metals, because that's something that they will study later on. So if I do it like this. Now again, mine is looking a bit scruffy already, because I've got smudged biro and stuff like that. What's that? Transition metals. So yeah, you will find the best way of doing it, just to make sure you've got you explain that nice and clearly. Now the final thing to point out in this section of the lesson is that I'm not going to go into relative atomic mass, I'm not going to go into proton number, any of that stuff. Right now, it's still a big idea for them that all of the stuff that's in the universe, we can think of it in terms of particles. That was what we covered, the big idea from the previous unit. We're just introducing this new idea now, that actually different elements have different types of particles. That's a big idea for them to cope with, and we're introducing all of these elements here. I don't want to go down that road just yet of then introducing this other crazy idea that actually, most of the atom's empty space and we've got these protons and neutrons, electrons, whatever. That's too much. So this stuff, for now, in year 7, I'm just going to park. Because at the moment, I just want them to be comfortable with the different elements. Now, the second part of the lesson is just about chemical symbols. So that's an introduction to the periodic table that we've just seen. And again, I would just do some really, really simple examples. Start with some ones with just one letter, emphasize that it's always a capital. So I could do something like this and say that hydrogen, symbol H, and I could show them on the periodic table. So maybe for the next one, I'll say, next we're going to look for, I don't know, phosphorus. And just show them, model to them exactly how you would go about finding the chemical symbol. So I have a look through here and I go, okay, where's phosphorus? Okay, look, phosphorus there. So the chemical symbol is P. It's a capital P, and always the first letter of the chemical symbol is a capital, so that is definitely going to be a capital P. So do a couple with just one letter, and then you can start doing ones with two letters. And again, try and pick easy ones at first. So I might do iron next, something like that. Again, they quite like it if you ask them to find iron in the periodic table. So we go through and, okay, oh, here's iron. Look, there's iron. And that's Fe. Now, what do you notice about this symbol? Well, the first letter is a capital, isn't it? And then the second letter is lowercase. Oh, and you see that's the same for all of these. Really draw their attention to this idea that there are very definite rules for how we give symbols to the elements. They might ask, why is iron Fe and not IR or something like that? My knowledge of these kind of Latin versions of Latin names is not the best, but yeah, that one is something to do with ferrum, I think, isn't it? And yeah, you may know better than me on that, but again, some context can be quite helpful. Maybe do a couple more like that. And then a really good one to practice, the classic one, which you're probably familiar with already, is to have a look at cobalt. Or in fact, before you do cobalt, you might want to do, what if I had this one? And what the misconception that you want to tease out here is that they think it's cobalt, because they look through their periodic table and they go, okay, where's cobalt? Oh, look, CO, it must be cobalt. And then say, oh, but hang on. What do I notice about how I've drawn it here? That's a C and an O. So then you might want to say, well, actually, this one is not cobalt, it's carbon monoxide. So you could get them to do that on whiteboards or something like that. Maybe as a turn and talk, but really address that. That would be carbon monoxide. And then you can show here that there's two different elements. That's C, that's O, which is carbon and oxygen. And just draw their attention to the fact that, therefore, this must be a compound. And contrast that, and I would go through this example and really explain it in depth and say, but if we look at cobalt, that would be capital C, lowercase o. And you might find others, other good examples. I can't think of any off the top of my head. That's the one that's in the slides. But I think it's worth spending some time going through that, just to make sure they're really clear on the difference between a compound with two single letter elements and an element which is capital and then lowercase. There's lots and lots of good questions in the slides, which hopefully will get your students thinking. We'll come back in the next lesson and look at this stuff in a bit more detail. I think we're on molecules next. Thanks.